everyone, it's Elin. And today I'm gonna talk with you about books. Because we're all home now, I hope you're all doing well. As we're more time to read because we can get up early, read for some hours and then go to work or school, or even in the afternoon we don't have to sit in the car or public transport for so long before getting home. We can just read in our garden or terrace or in our living room, whatever. So I think it's the perfect activity to do nowadays because you can also kind of travel with your mind to other places. So I love reading. I read a lot always, but I've noticed that I've read more since the quarantaine started. So it's since November 2019 that I'm writing down every book I finish. So when the month of May started, that was 6 months ago. So in this half year, I've read a total of 51 books, which is more than I expected because it's almost 2 books per week, so it's really a lot. And I've also written down the writers and the languages of the books because I read in a lot of different languages. So the month I read the least was in January. I only finished 6 books, and that was because I had holiday. I was in Thailand, so I didn't read a lot there. I was just busy exploring and eating and so on. And the month I've read the most was March. I finished 11 books, so that's way more. And now I will give you the percentages of the languages I've read in. I've taken a very long time to calculate this, so I hope some people are interested in this. So I've read 25 books in Dutch, which is 49%. 13 books in Italian, which is 25.5%. 11 books in English, which is 21.6%, and then 2 books in French, which is 3.9%. So yeah, very interesting. And now I'll just go over the whole list, so maybe you can find some inspiration for nice books to read, or maybe you're just interested in what I like to read. I don't know. Let's start. So in November 2019, the first book I finished was Red ons Maria Montanelli van Herman Koch. So this is obviously a Dutch book, and it's a really short book. It's nice, it's literature, but it's the perspective from a young boy about his school and his bit poshy neighborhood, and he rebels against that. I liked it. Then the second book was Hier was ik from Gayle Forman. So this was a translated book, originally written in English, but I read it in Dutch. I lent it from Natalie and I liked it, but it was more for younger children. It's about a girl that commits suicide and then her best friend kind of figures out why she did that. It's a heavy topic, but it's written in a way that it's not very difficult, but it was still interesting. I had already read it some years ago, but I didn't remember why she committed suicide, so I wanted to reread it, so I did. Then the third book is also a Dutch book, Marthe Jacobs from Tim Krabbé, and that's also Dutch literature. I really like that book. It's also the second time I read it, and it's about a love story, but actually the main character looks back on it after the girl he was in love with died, and she also committed suicide. Ooh, bit weird, but starting to notice a pattern in my reading. But yeah, it's still a nice book because I just like love stories, but when there's a tragic element it makes a bit more, I don't like love stories that are just, oh yay, we get married and everything was just perfect. I really don't like that. This is nice. And also because they had a really big age difference. So they met when she was 9 and he's 16. Back then they weren't in love, but they just played football together. And then some years later they went to the same school. She was in the first year and he in the last. And then, yeah, it's a really interesting relationship and it's very well described, so I can recommend that. Then the fourth book I read was an Italian book, the only Italian book I've read in November. Ci vediamo, giorno, questi, from Federica Bosco. And this is a story about a friendship, and I don't really remember what was going on. I just remember I liked it because the two friends grew up together, so their relationship changed a lot. And at the start of their life, one was the more popular and cool girl, but actually in the end the other one, yeah, the strong one becomes weaker. We see her from her weaker side, and yeah, roles switch, and it was well described, so I liked that. Then another Dutch book, Zout, mijn, huid, from Benoîte Groult. Yeah, this was originally written in French, but I've read it in Dutch. Thanks Natalie for lending me this book too. And this was also a love story, but also tragic because it was from a different class. It was an old book. So she was, yeah, more high class, and the boy she fell in love with was a really rough seaman. It was in Bretagne. And yeah, they had a very physical relationship because yeah, they couldn't really live together or be together. So it was also a bit sad, but interesting. I liked it. Then the first English book of November I finished was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, written by Yuval Noah Harari. I don't know if I pronounce it well, but I mean, everyone must know this series. It's the same author of Sapiens and Homo Deus. And that was the second time I read it, because the first time it was too difficult for me because it's quite a technical English. So I couldn't continue reading. So now I retried it and I succeeded, and it was really interesting, as are the two other books which I've read later during the year. So those are a real big recommendation. I think especially during these times, because they really give you an insight in, yeah, how our society works, and it's just really eye-opening. Yeah, it's really interesting, so that's a must-read for me. Then the other book is again a Dutch book, but originally written in Norwegian. I can't read that, so I read it in Dutch, and it's Zo ben ik niet from Kjell Askilden. And these were short stories, so yeah, they were nice, but it's not really, I cannot tell you more about it. I liked them, they were quite poetic, and I just read one each night before getting to sleep. Then another English book, The Woman Who Walked on Sunshine, and this is from a really nice series, the #1 Ladies Detective Agency from Alexander McCall Smith, and it's set in Botswana, where the author also lived. So this one really makes you travel, because these descriptions of the wild bush and the heat, the sun, now it's also warm here, but yeah, it really makes my mind wander to this place. And if you also want to, you can read those, but I've also made 3 quite long videos about my trip to Botswana, so I will put them here somewhere so you can watch those. And yeah, all the books in this series are just lovely. It's really, yeah, cute. They make you happy. It's not, there's no drama. Of course there is a bit of tension sometimes, but they always resolve it, and it just feel good travel books, so really nice. Oh, and then I've read Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind from the same author, Yuval Noah Harari. So I've already said it, these are very interesting. And then we're in December 2019, and the first book I read was an Italian book, Il maestro di Francesco Carofiglio. And this is a book my old, she's not old, but the Italian teacher I had previously lent it to me and I liked it. It's about an old theater actor but also writer, and he kind of tells his life to a young fan of his who comes to bring him his food because she works in a restaurant, and he was always really closed off, so she's the only one who could really get to him, and I think then he dies, but I'm not sure. It's a nice book. And then I read Voor, leeuwen, written by Peter Allison. This was also a translated book. I think he's from Australia, and he was I don't know if he is. He certainly was a safari guide in Botswana as well. So these are also short stories about funny or interesting, dangerous things that happened to him. So I really liked reading those. Then I read Huid, smelt from Lize Spit. And this is a Flemish author. And it was her first book and it became an immediate success. It's really well written, it's quite thick, but wow, just the tension builds up because one chapter is written in the past and then one in the present. So in the beginning it's a bit confusing, but then after a while you start to understand how the past influenced what she's doing now. And it really builds up super well and it leaves you hanging till the end. And it certainly doesn't disappoint you. So definitely a must read, I think. Then I've read Vochtige Streken from Charlotte Roche. Actually it was written in German before. And although I do German on Duolingo, I cannot read books in it yet. So I've read it in Dutch. And this, yeah, it was also a very interesting book. It was easy to read, it was funny. It's about a girl that actually shaved her butt, but then she cut herself, so she needs to go to the hospital. And there she's really bored, so she basically tells her life to the readers. And it's really interesting because it speaks about taboos that we don't talk about. Like, don't have examples. Oh yeah, she leaves, for example, her tampon in the lift because she likes spreading her bacteria, or I think she drank her own pee, stuff like that. Really things that, you know, people are immediately disgusted by usually, but maybe some more people do that, so it was interesting to read. And then my grandmother also read it because she was so intrigued by what I told her about it, and she thought it was really weird and gross. But then another friend of mine also read it and she also found it interesting. So if you're not disgusted by that, it's a book to read. The next book is The Odyssey van Mohammed, written by Mohamed El Bachiri, which is also a Belgian author, and he's from Moroccan descent, as you may have guessed. And he wrote a book some years ago when the attacks in Malbec were there, because his wife died in those attacks. So he kind of told their love story and the pain he felt and how it was to live with his two sons alone after this terrible thing happened to them. So now, some years later, it's another book by him, and all his books are really philosophical, poetic. They're short but really well written. So this was more his general odyssey in life, and I also thought it was really wonderful. Yeah, he writes really well. Then I read Gesprekken met vrienden from Sally Rooney, which is Conversations with Friends. And yeah, I don't know, this one I didn't like it so much. It was easy to read, but I don't know, I didn't like it. I don't remember really well what happened. It was just, yeah, you were kind of waiting for something to happen, and yeah, maybe there were some jokes I didn't get or some references, but I don't know. Because it got a lot of positive criticism everywhere, so I thought, oh, I'll just read it. But I didn't like it. I don't know why. And then I read, that was the last book I read in December, by Greta Thunberg. Niemand is te klein om het verschil te maken. Nobody is too small to make a difference. Which are basically all her speeches together. So I knew most of it already, but I got it from the grandmother of a friend, so I read it. And then in January I didn't read so much. I read Let op mijn woorden from Griet op de Beek, and I really like this writer. It's also a Flemish writer, and all her books are really, all the characters are described so well. You can really, yeah, it's as if it's your brother. You know so many details about their lives, what they think, what they feel. It's really amazing how she does that. So this was her latest book. I bought it and I brought it with me on my trip. So I really liked that. Then I read a children's book, not really for small children, but maybe 13 more. And that was called Maaike and Domenico from Suzanne Wittpenning. And it was also a kind of love story, but she was getting bullied in the class and he was the new cool kid, so he stood up for her and then they kind of fell in love, but he was a bad boy, so he didn't want her to get involved with his problems, and in the end it's, yeah, he goes away again, but they know they'll love each other forever. So it was also quite a cute story, but yeah, more for children. Then I've read the book by the most famous sexuologist in Belgium and maybe in the Dutch-speaking country, which is Goedele Likens. And I read the book Help, mijn kind denkt aan seks. Help, my child thinks about sex. So it was a really funny book to read because there were all questions sent in by parents and she responds to those. And sometimes it was really, I was really surprised seeing what silly things parents could ask, like, oh, should I speak with my kid about menstruation before she gets it? I mean, please do so, because otherwise it will be really traumatic for these kids. Like, just speak about it with your children. Then I've read an Italian book, Maria, by Lalla Romano, and this was also quite an old book, relatively speaking, of course. And I liked this one. It was just a story of this Maria and her surroundings, and it basically describes her whole life, which I like in a book to see how the character develops. So I liked it. Then another Dutch book which was originally written in English, Lucas by Kevin Brooks. And this was also more a children's book, but it was nice. So this Lucas comes to this village, but people don't like him and the main character doesn't understand why, and they become friends. But then, yeah, a little girl dies, but while people are there they see it's not Lucas's fault, but they still accuse him, so then he runs away. And yeah, it was a nice book. I cannot explain the whole story. And then I read Stoner by John Williams, and this one also in Dutch, even though it was written in English. And this was the first book I've read. Those are called dwarsligger, and they are horizontally, so you read them like this. They're very tiny, you can just put them in your pocket, so that's practical. Well, we did 3 of the 6 months, and I think that's enough for now because otherwise it's very long. So I will do a second part of this. But maybe I can say some things about reading in general, because I see that a lot of people around me, like mostly my age, people my age, they tend to not read, not like reading. And I think it's very, sad, because I mean, I've spent so many hours of my life reading. I really wouldn't know what to do without books. So I cannot understand or grasp why anyone would not like reading. But I understand maybe, if you are dyslexic or if you were always forced to, or I don't know. Of course there may be reasons why you don't like it, but in general you can learn so much through books. You can discover so many new things, and I don't know, I really love that. So I hope maybe you got some inspiration by my list of books. And if you have any questions, or if you have must-reads or recommendations in general, please leave them here below. Let me know which books spoke to you the most, and if you read them, please make sure to let me know. And never stop reading! Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye!